Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are here on The Jam. It's Sunday night, April 23rd, on DZRJ Radio, the voice of the Philippines. This is Eric LeCain, and I'm here talking about some of the most interesting stories around the world for this week. Maybe you didn't get to check the papers or watch the TV or Google the news, but sit back and we'll talk about some things that I think you might be interested in. Now, so I'm having dinner with my friend from Cebu, and somehow we got on the subject of government corruption. And I was kind of laughing about something President Duterte said last week, where he said that we can shoot corrupt BIR officials if they demand money, more money than they're supposed to get in order to do their job. So it seems that Mr. Duterte is coming up with some new creative ways to stop corruption. He's been on this campaign to stop corruption here in the Philippines. So it looked like he's doing a good job at that. But my friend, he didn't really laugh so much about it. He just kept saying how the Philippines was so corrupt, and the police and the judges and the politicians, and it was the most corrupt country in the world. Well, the Philippines has its issues about corruption, but is it the most corrupt country in the world? So I thought what we would do this week is we would look at corruption stories around the world that happened this week, just to see how the Philippines sort of stacks up. So let's start out in Pakistan. The Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif narrowly escaped persecution by the Supreme Court this week by a vote of 3-2. He's worth $1.4 billion, which is assumed he amassed through government corruption. They're allowing him to stay in power. However, a huge investigation is against him and will continue. Questions arose over his business dealings of Mr. Sharif with his links to massive offshore accounts. 1,500 police officers had to be deployed around the courthouse in Islamabad, where people are shouting, "Go Nawaz, go Nawaz." Critics have suggested the offshore companies were used to launder all his illegally obtained wealth. Pakistani analysts were quick to warn the prime minister, do not be too triumphant over the verdict, noting that they are still going to be investigating him. Also, thousands took to the streets in Bratislava, which is in Slovakia, which is over near Austria and Hungary, I believe, to protest the corruption and call for the resignation of Slovakia's interior minister, who's also very close with the Prime Minister, Robert Fico. Now, the interior minister has all these dealings with these very corrupt real estate companies who actually are renting an apartment to the prime minister. Interestingly, the demonstration in the march was planned by a couple of school children. Two 18-year-olds decided to organize the protest after being inspired by the anti-corruption protests in Romania. Around 5,000 turned out on the streets of Bratislava for one of the largest demonstrations they have ever had against a leader. Also in Nigeria, where the current president ran on the promise to clean up corruption. Well, the Nigerian Anti-Corruption Agency was on an investigation and went into an apartment and found $43 million in cash, neatly wrapped up in stacks of $100 bills and packed into filing cabinets and wardrobe containers. It turns out the apartment was owned by the head of the government's spy agency, who claimed ownership of it after the raid and said he needed it to run his covert missions. Many of the tenants in the upscale apartment building in Lagos, including the unit where the massive hoard of cash was found, were all owned by high-level officials and politicians. Since then, the spy agency's director has been suspended. Also suspended is another top civil servant in connection with a corruption probe into stealing of government relief funds, which were supposed to be used for humanitarian crisis in the northeastern part of Nigeria, where millions of people are facing famine. Moving on this week to Venezuela, who had a huge and violent protest. In fact, in recent weeks, there has been nothing but protest over the corruption of the current government. The people are demanding that the current president, Nicolas Maduro, step down from office. Venezuela has the largest and richest oil reserves in the world. However, they can't sell it because of all the sanctions against it. So currently, Venezuela has no cash. By all intents and purposes, it is completely broke. Basically, its people are starving to death, and there's no medicine, and the prices of goods have gone to ridiculously high rates. The president has been defiant through all of this and calls the opposition and the protesters vandals and terrorists. He said, "I will get them and I will capture all these criminals." But there's something very interesting about what's going on in Venezuela this week and why so many people are so mad in Venezuela. And it has to do with the US President Donald Trump. Now, this is where we see that corruption comes in many forms. A report has come out with a list of the biggest donors for the swearing-in ceremony and the inauguration of Donald Trump. Now, currently, Trump is under fire for raising and accepting $107 million in donations for his inauguration ceremony. He is under the gun now on this issue because Obama, if we remember, raised $53 million for his inauguration, which was the largest amount in history. But his inauguration was one of the largest ever, with millions in attendance and a huge internationally known stars that came and hundreds of thousands turning out for their concerts. These huge movie screens were planted all over the White Lawn. There were people packed in for miles. And they spent $50 million on that inauguration. But Trump's was quite small in comparison. Maybe only a few 100,000. And they had basically no megastars, no big concerts. It was mostly high school marching bands. And the inauguration itself was only partially filled from the frontmost part of the lawn. So the Obamas spent $50 million on his massive inauguration. So what did Trump do with the $107 million for his rather tiny inauguration? Where's the money? Why did he accept so much money? And who gave it to him? I mean, this is not government money, but still people are asking, where did all that money go? Because it definitely didn't go for this small inauguration. Even if it's been said, plated everybody in gold, they still couldn't have spent $107 million. So the question has come up, not only where did it go, but what did the donors get for their cash? I mean, some donors had to put in a lot of money. So what exactly did they get? Because it wasn't Beyonce, and it wasn't Jay-Z, and it wasn't Barbra Streisand. Now, the interesting part of this comes in according to reports this week that an investor from Venezuela got to meet with the National Security Council to discuss sanctions in Venezuela. But why would this guy get a meeting like that? Well, it turns out that his dad made a donation to Donald Trump's inauguration for $666,000 US. And he didn't just get a meeting with the Security Council, but he got a meeting with Steve Bannon, the White House chief strategist for Donald Trump. The purpose of that meeting was supposedly for him to show a 10-point plan outlining a proposal to lift U.S. sanctions on Venezuela and change the U.S. foreign policy on that country. The meeting was set up by a businessman with close ties to Donald Trump Jr. So that this company, through Donald Trump Jr., could do business in the United States, which isn't allowed because there's sanctions on Venezuela. 3 people were killed just the other day due to rioting in streets in Venezuela. People are protesting on a regular basis. The people have no food, there's no basic medicine, no money. But they should be a rich, rich country, but they are not. And in the middle of all this, the state-run oil ministry also donated $500,000 that it can't afford to this way overfunded Trump inauguration. So who is asking for these donations? Would this investor get a meeting with the chief vice strategist if it had not been for the $666,000 US? Now you ask, isn't this thing kind of illegal? Well, it turns out this kind of thing is illegal. You cannot request funds to pay for something and then just keep the money if you don't use it, or putting in a filing cabinet or in a wardrobe closet like they do in Nigeria. So now what does this really mean? Could I do this? Could anyone do this? If I wanted to get a meeting with the U.S. Security Council on putting a spy satellite over my stupid neighbor's house to see if his chickens are coming into my yard, do I just need to make a big donation to his event? That probably won't happen. But if I was a friend of the president's son and I floated them some big cash as a donation so I could get sanctions lifted, so maybe I could go back to making billions while my country starves. I don't know. Is the Philippines the most corrupt country in the world? Maybe not by a long shot. This is Eric LeCain here on The Jam, and we're talking about some interesting stories going on around the world this week here on DZRJ Radio, the voice of the Philippines.